I'm not scared to have difficult conversations. For me, that's way more important than hiding something, making it look good, and then at the end of the day, like disappointing my teammates, disappointing my colleagues. ChatGPT, I think, came out sometime November, December
Mhm.
2022.
Yeah.
And I didn't even use it until like late 2023. That's how curious I was about AI. Being different doesn't mean that we are deficient, even if the way how we write or the way how we speak is not like perfect. I was like, this is too much work for such little satisfaction, basically,
Hmm.
because you go through so much work to get your paper published. And at the end of the day, maybe like 10 people are going to read it. To be honest, I never thought I stood a chance because I always had this idea that like big tech hires from prestigious universities. And I was not coming from like a top 20 or top 50 university. And so I was like, they're not even going to look at my resume. I'm always saddened when I see discussions about like professors making this requests that AI is not allowed in my course, because I feel like that does a disservice to the students. To be honest, I never wanted to come to the United States.
It just
I
happened.
think I think at the time I used to eat like street food. They have this like chicken over rice that's like just $5, was $5 at the time. And I ate so many of those dishes. Yeah, it was extremely hard. I think that's, to be honest, the toughest period of my life. I mean, at the time, I thought that having two kids back to back was going to be easier. Boy, how wrong I was. But I'm happy it happened that way because, now my kids are almost 7 and 8.
So, welcome to a new episode of the Thinking Tech podcast. Today, I'm really happy to be here with Irena Palamani Xhurxhi. Am I pronouncing that right?
Georgie, yeah, very
Georgie.
close.
Um, so, you're a senior economist and tech lead at Amazon. You also have a PhD in economics, and more importantly, a really important story and fascinating journey into tech, into academia as well. And so, really thrilled to have you here. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
No, it's my pleasure. So I noticed you on LinkedIn and just the stories you were telling about the journey from immigration as an immigrant, sorry, and then going into technology, especially pivoting in that sense, was really inspiring, and I would love to go more into that. So before we dive into the journey coming into the US, um, do you want to give a quick description of yourself and introduce yourself the way you want?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So my name is Irena. I am originally from Albania. It is a small country in the Balkans. And I have two sisters, and I'm the eldest one. So I always had to kind of pave the way for myself, and try to do better, for my sisters. I was raised in my hometown until I was 14. Then I left for my high school. I went to a private high school in the capital of Albania. So I left home when I was 14. And after that, I left Albania when I was 18 to continue my undergraduate studies in Bulgaria at an American university. And yeah, so then, after I graduated, that's when I thought that continuing my education with a PhD would probably be a good step forward. And that's what brought me to United States. But I feel like I've been away from home for so long now. And it's crazy how fast time passes.
Time does go quick, and they say it goes faster as you get older. But
Yeah,
growing
for
up
sure.
in Albania, what were some of those early influences that as you were saying, shaped the way you saw the PhD and helped you make that decision to go to the US?
Yeah, sure. My mom was a teacher. She was a biology and chemistry teacher. So I would often go with her as she was teaching, like even when I was like very little. And I think that's how I got my love for teaching, basically, because I would love, getting the chalks. We used to have blackboards in Albania and like just, writing stuff on it. And I really enjoyed that process, and I enjoyed seeing my mom teaching. So I knew that I would love teaching. I was raised seeing my mother teach. And then my father was an economist. Now he's retired. I mean, they're both retired now. And so to some extent, I'm a mix of both of them. So I stayed within my father's field, and I kind of extended it with my mother's profession. When I was doing my undergraduate studies, I did a senior thesis in economics. And during my entire undergraduate, I also was a TA for linear
Hmm.
algebra, a few other math courses, because I double majored in math and economics.
Hmm.
And where I truly saw that, I really enjoy research, because I really enjoyed the process of like doing my senior thesis. And I also really enjoyed being a TA and kind of mentoring others. And when I was talking to my professors, they were like, "Well, we think you would be great for a PhD. These are the two main things that you need to love in order to pursue a PhD." And then I decided to apply. So I think this was kind of the context of how I got to that decision.
Yeah, wonderful. And why the US? Why did you take that leap?
To be honest, I never wanted to come to the United States.
It just
I
happened.
think, yeah, my preference would have always been to stay in Europe. I think I did apply to a few places in UK, which I think was my first preference. However, at the time we are talking about, 2011, Albania did not have a lot of permissions that it has now, to basically travel in the EU and to get scholarships in EU. So back then, I mean, if I wanted to pursue some kind of like school or graduate studies in EU, I would have to pay out of pocket,
Mm.
and I think it was the main restriction. Whereas in US, I believe I applied to around like 11 places, and in six of them, I got full fellowship, where,
Wow.
not only you do not have to pay, but they also give you like a small stipend that you can use to pay for your rent and pay for your food. I mean, it's very basic, but still, I think for someone who is coming from such a small country where, my parents' um, monthly income was around $1,000 both combined. I mean, for me, this was a major determinant of where I go to study so that I don't become a burden for them. And this is why
Hmm.
I think the United States became the only solution at the time. And then, I mean, as I was doing my PhD, I got engaged and I got married, and then, life just took its own path, and I'm still here.
Wonderful. But yeah, no, that does make sense. I mean, it removes a lot of the challenges that a lot of people usually face coming into the US, and helps them settle down. But on the topic of those challenges, what did you see? I guess financial challenges weren't as pertinent for you, but there must have definitely been more social challenges. Um, how did you see that transition going into US, and what were some of those biggest barriers that you had faced?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I think even finances were still a challenge.
Mm.
I mean, I remember, as I was getting closer to getting my next month's stipend, there would sometimes be days where I would barely have any food because I didn't have a lot of money left.
Wow.
I did my PhD in New York, and New York is very brutal.
Yeah.
I think at the time I used to eat like street food. They have this like chicken over rice that's like just $5, was $5 at the time. And I ate so many of those dishes. I mean, that had an impact on my physical health as well, because I was eating very unhealthy. So I think that's certainly one huge challenge that I think
Hmm.
continues even if you get a fellowship, basically, unless you get like additional support or you're working some extra job. I think the fellowship is probably too little to be enough, or for you to do things properly.
Hmm.
I think other challenges I would say are lack of knowledge of the systems. So, for example, you come to a new country, you don't know how things work, you have to figure it out all yourself. You have to make sure that you're surrounded by the right people that give you the correct information.
Mhm.
I mean, here, not knowing something is very costly. Like it can cost you so much, time wise, money wise, if you're doing the wrong thing. So I think for me, that was also a major challenge. And then, I mean, of course, being in a new country, getting yourself accustomed to a new culture, new way, of transportation and like, getting used to new cities and new
Especially New
people.
York as well.
Yeah, New York. Yeah, New York is pretty cold. So I think, I was very lucky to have some very great friends within my cohort as I was doing my PhD. But I think it would have been extremely hard for me to find friends in New York, outside of my PhD. And to be honest, I didn't have that many. I mean, first of all, because you're so busy and, you don't have a lot of time to socialize, but also because in general, everybody's busy. So no one has time to really stop by and ask you questions and get to know you. It's like a very
Hmm.
fast paced life.
I must have been very busy for you, especially because, as you were saying, then you got engaged, and you had,
Yeah. Yeah, I started my PhD in 2013 in
yeah.
New York, and then in 2014 I got married, and then in 2015 I moved to Connecticut, where my husband was. So I think that commute back and forth for those 2 years was also pretty hard. And then I had my daughter in 2017 and my son in 2018.
Hmm.
And during the entire period that I was doing my PhD, for during the years that I was in Connecticut, I was basically also teaching full time at Trinity
Hmm.
College. So I had, a load of 5 courses per year. So it was very busy. And I mean, in hindsight, I think I could have done things differently and still gotten, the same kind of experience and same learnings and probably also less challenges. But I think everything happens for a reason, and
Hmm.
yeah, you just have to go through it.
Hmm. So how did you manage that time having so many different responsibilities, being now a new mother as well, having, I guess, almost two jobs to that point? What, how did you
It
manage that,
was
and how do
very
you
it
then
was
teach
very
people
hard.
about that?
Yeah, it was extremely hard. I think that's, to be honest, the toughest period of my life.
Well,
And it's kind of funny because when I joined Amazon, everyone would tell me like, "Oh my God, you're so cool under pressure. Like you are so composed." And I would always think back at those days when, I had two crying like kids, basically under two, both of them, and me working on my PhD and preparing my lecture notes for, tomorrow for the next day. It was extremely difficult. I think I really feel like it was a boot camp for me. It really, that's how I built like my resilience. That's how I build my like time management skills. That's how I build my energy management skills. Um, I mean, at the time, I thought that having two kids back to back was going to be easier.
hmm.
I was training as a labor economist, and I had read about a lot of papers about this concept of baby bunching,
Okay.
where basically women have kids back to back so that they are out of the labor market, say for like 3 years, but then
Hmm.
once they go, like they do not take any more interruptions.
Hmm.
And this was perceived as being less disruptive to the career of a mom than, if you have a kid, take 2 years, then have
Yeah.
another kid, take another 2 years. And so that's what I tried to do. I was like, okay, maybe I should baby bunch. And I was like,
Yeah.
maybe I should baby bunch during my PhD, thinking that that was going to be less stressful than doing it during an actual job. Boy, how wrong I was. But I'm happy it happened that way because, now my kids are almost 7 and 8. So, it's nice when you see them growing up now.
That's wonderful that you applied really those teachings that you had in your economics background to your actual life. And I guess there's a difference between how theory works and how practical those
Oh, for
things really
sure.
are.
For sure. I mean, nothing beats practice, really.
Hmm. So I guess that's how you try to transmit those learnings through your social media, through stories that you write about those times, and you try to help, I guess, people that are now in your position or are in the position that you were before. Could you
Yeah,
tell me a little
yeah,
bit more about your mission there
for
and
sure.
what you're trying to do?
Sure. I mean, I had always wanted to be more active in LinkedIn and share my learnings, and I wasn't able to do so until recently. And I mean, it does take a lot of effort, so it's not something that's like very easy.
Hmm.
So I understand why it's hard, and I empathize with everybody that wants to do it, but like doesn't find the time to do it. The main motivator for me was me talking to people within Amazon. So here, I am a mentor, and I usually have a lot of mentees who are just, starting. They're pretty junior, or, others that basically contact me. They are PhD candidates and they want to know more. And so every time that I would give them advice, everyone would be like, oh my God, I wish I knew this sooner, or I wish I had someone who would have shared this with me. And so I thought that there's a lot that I know that I've learned from my own mistakes and my own failures that could help someone avoid
Hmm.
those mistakes if they probably, found out about it. Or, it can help them shift their mindset. Let's say, if they're seeing things in a negative way, then maybe if I say that, there's light at the end of the tunnel and this is all for a reason and it's going to help you and it's going to pay back, those kind of like motivational speech. I think I thought that would be super helpful, basically, and that's the main reason why I started writing. So I usually try to be as authentic as possible and as
Hmm.
fun as possible in my post, even though I know that shows my weaknesses to some extent and things that I've done wrong. But I'm okay admitting those as long as I know that they can help someone else feel better about their journey and be more optimistic about their future.
No, it's wonderful, and I think it's important to admit one's, shortcomings or failures to some extent. Not that they're bad things, but on the contrary, that they're stepping stones, right, to help you get to that next. And you talk pretty often about as well leadership, and we've discussed this previously as well. Your view on leadership in general in technology and also in academia and more generally. How do you see? I guess you're becoming a leader in this realm for these people at least, and how do you see? What are the key traits of a good leader in that case, from what you've seen and how you try to embody them?
That's a great question. I'm gonna quote something like from one of my favorite books, like a statement there that says that a leader is to be given the opportunity and the responsibility to facilitate the career of others. So this is exactly how I see it, in the sense that for me, I wouldn't call myself a leader if I'm not trying my best to lift up my team as I try to lift up myself. So I think you are as successful as your team is. So if your team is not gonna, if you're not giving them the opportunity, the space to grow, then you cannot expect that they are gonna come up with output that is gonna help you grow.
Hmm.
So I try to be very empathetic. I mean, I always put myself in other people's shoes and try to see things from their perspective. I am very curious in general. So I always ask more questions. And I think this helps me go into every conversation with an open mind. So I'm always willing to change, my mind, as long as you provide the right arguments. I would say the main thing that I try to lead with is clarity.
Hmm.
I've seen that clarity can be, um, lack of clarity can be a huge lack of motivation, within a team. And I don't mean just clarity in terms of scope, but clarity in everything that I do. Like, for example, why are we focusing on the tasks that we are or on the projects that we are? Why are they important? or clarity in terms of career growth, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
what do you need to get to the next level? I think a lot of junior um, people are kind of tired of like carrots being dangled in front of them and saying
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, achieve this and then that. So I try to be very clear upfront. So for me, clarity is very, very, very important because that also brings honesty, brings trust. I'm not scared to have like difficult conversations. For me, that's way more important than, hiding something, making it look good. And then at the end of the day, like disappointing my teammates, disappointing my colleagues. So I'd rather have the tough conversation, say things as they are, and help people with some actionable items, right? How they can do better
Mm-hmm.
or what they are lacking, how can they breach that gap? Or if they're doing everything correct, just to let them know that, I think everything you're doing is right and not just give them more than they can handle just because they're asking for it. So,
For
um,
sure.
yeah, I mean, those are kind of the main things that I focus on.
Definitely. And I think it's great to see the bigger picture and show that the people, especially within teams, within, corporate companies as well, it's very difficult, obviously, to kind of see what's in it for the person in terms of their personal growth, career growth. Why are they really doing what they do every day? And then obtaining that clarity is not easy. It's one thing to try to obviously enforce clarity or have clarity within teams and between coworkers, but it's another thing to actually get there. So it's very difficult in that sense. But on the topic of clarity, let's gain a bit of clarity on your current role in Amazon and what are the goals that the team currently has. So you're in the AI transformational team, if I understand correctly. Could you tell us a little bit more about your role and the team's objectives as well?
Yeah, sure. So since I joined Amazon, I've always been part of the marketing org.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the org that creates the major campaigns, national campaigns at the Amazon brand level. So you can think about, all the ads that you see for Prime Day, for campaigns like Back to School, Off to College, as well as Super Bowl. I don't think we did a Super Bowl ad in the last 2 years, but that's all part of basically our portfolio of campaigns that we run. When I joined Amazon, I joined as an economist, and I helped build measurement models to measure campaign performance. So initially, I focused on mass media channels, TV, digital, social. Then Amazon had just started piloting marketing on Amazon Vans and Amazon Boxes,
Mm-hmm.
and so I moved, to that project and started working towards unblocking measurability for that channel, which was very important for our stakeholders. And then after that, I kind of moved into leading AI initiatives. So, and it's kind of funny actually because I was not a big believer in AI at all. So just to give you some context, I remember like ChatGPT, I think came out sometime November, December
Mm-hmm.
2022.
Yeah.
And I didn't even use it until like late 2023. I mean, that's how curious I was about AI. And so, what really changed my mind is like I went in 2023, I went to the Grace Hopper conference, which is a conference about women and minorities in tech.
Mm-hmm.
And there was someone from the Albertson company that gave a demo on a chatbot. And then I saw it, and it's like a light bulb went on. I'm like, oh my God, this is so powerful. Like I could imagine it doing so much work for us within my org. Because for example, in my org, every time we run a campaign, let's say a Prime Day, I mean, we have had Prime Day campaigns every year, right? So it's always, let's say, very insightful to look at the results from the past campaign and then compare them to, this year's and see what are the major differences and so on. But then every time you want to do that, you have to go chase docs that people have written in the past that maybe they have changed teams, so they have left Amazon. And so I think at the time I was like, oh my God, if we put like everything that we own or that we have written in a knowledge base and then we just like conversate with this chatbot, it's going to be so much easier. And it's a way for us to also manage our knowledge, right? Because right now, knowledge loss is like harder to prevent. And so I came back and my manager was like, hey, how did you like the conference? And I was like, I thought it was great. And I just pointed out that this was one specific session that I really enjoyed. And then she's like, oh, that's cool. And then 2 hours later, she's like, the VP has an offsite in 10 days, and I put you up for a demo for a chatbot. And I'm like, what are you saying? I don't have anything ready. And she's like, well, just clear your schedule, focus only on this, and make it happen. And so it was a little bit nerve wracking, but I was able to come up with like a very simple solution. I think, at the time, the context window was so little. So I was only able to put like around 6 documents that we had. And I deployed it on Streamlit so that it was very easy from a UI, UX perspective. And I basically gave a demo in the offsite. And I think everyone was like super impressed by how fast these tools were digesting information and giving like right answers. And after that, that kind of paved my way toward AI, basically, because my VP at the time, he basically said, let's start thinking more seriously about how we want to incorporate AI in our org. And I think for me, coming from measurement and insights, I had to also do a lot of work and get in touch with others from other uh, parts of the workflow, right? Because we do a lot of work. We do, let's say, brand strategy. We do, uh, we have to think about, let's say, what's the media we're going to invest in, what are the channels we're going to invest in. We do production, we do post production. And I wasn't aware of what everyone does. So for me, before I could even think about how AI can help, I had to figure out what needs to be solved first, right? Like, what are the main bottlenecks that we are facing? So once I had those, then the next step was, can AI help, right? So kind of approaching it with a problem first mindset. So let's first figure out the problem, and then we figure out if AI can help. And then if AI can help, then we move, towards building a solution. But this is basically the space that I work in. So I'd say the intersection of marketing and technology. And I cannot hear you for some reason.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, now I can.
Yeah, no, I was just saying it's amazing to see how fast you pivoted between one, kind of role or kind of scope to another, and having to, I guess, make that demo in like 10 days. It must have forced you to learn all about the technology and be hands-on with it. I think it's one of the best ways to learn about anything really, but especially AI, is to really dig in and do a project and not just read about this on articles or online. So it's fascinating to see how you did it, and then now become obviously one of the experts in that area and leading a team in the whole space. So that's wonderful.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I always, because usually a lot of people write to me on LinkedIn asking about, how did you pivot? How can we make the transition? And I think what you said is so right, that it's not about like taking courses and taking certifications. I think it's all about hands-on work. Like, that's really the best way
Hmm.
learn and the best way to test the limitations of AI, because unless you play with it enough, it's very hard to actually see what the limitations are.
Yeah.
I always advise people to start with what they know best, because I think that's where you really know whether you're getting a good enough answer or not. So if you ask a question about something you don't know, AI is always going to impress you, no matter what it says. It could be totally wrong. You're still going to be impressed because the way how it says it is just so convincing and so natural that, like, there's
Yeah.
no way you're gonna, disbelieve it. But if you, let's say for me, the way how I started testing it was just, economics concepts and just testing it about, is it thinking strategically like an economist would? Like, that's how I tested its limitations.
Hmm.
And I mean, of course, now that we are building solutions, we have our own kind of benchmarks that we want to achieve. But I think everyone should go through that, like in order for them to understand the limitations of each tool and what tools are better for what tasks. Like for me, I use so many different tools, but usually I use them for specific tasks. Like I
Right.
don't use one tool for everything.
Of
And you
course.
only get to that distinction if you play enough with them. Otherwise, everything is going to look like kind of similar.
That's a great point. I think it's very important to have an expert behind, the use of such tools and not try to delegate everything and take everything as truth, but really be critical about everything it kind of spits back out to you. And one thing I want to get your opinion on is the use of AI and ChatGPT, because we're talking about expertise, knowledge, and everything, but specifically in the educational sector, given your background, obviously in academia, in teaching, um, how do you see, or what limitations perhaps are there that could be problematic for students using? We see a lot of overuse in some cases of students with AI. What are some limitations of that? And then what are obviously some benefits for students, but also for teachers, since you've kind of seen obviously both aspects.
Yeah, thank you. I think as with every technology, there's always going to be pros and cons. And I think the important thing is for us to try to understand what those are.
Hmm.
I don't think there's a way for us to get rid of all the cons or like, maximize the pros. We just have to figure out what those are and, how can we use them to our best advantage. Um, to be honest, I'm always saddened when I see discussions about like professors making this requests that, AI is not allowed in my course. Because I feel like that does a disservice to the students. In my mind, there should not be a discussion about AI is coming. I
Yeah.
think that AI is already here. So I don't think, there's anything that we can do to stop it because it's already here. Like
Hmm.
there's nothing we can do to stop it. So I think what professors should do is like think about creative ways of how they can incorporate AI in their courses so that they also give the opportunity to the students to start engaging with AI and start learning how to work with AI. In the framework that I helped shape for my org, I always see AI as a co-partner or a co-creator or like a sounding board, right, for what we are doing. So
Hmm.
I think in education, we can try to uh, keep the same kind of framework, right? So we don't want students to just use AI and take the output from AI as the output that they do not review and just submit as a
Yeah.
homework. I mean, I think that's what a lot of professors are scared about, and they are right to be scared because there's a lot of, as I said, this is one of the cons that students can misuse it, but that doesn't mean that they cannot find creative ways to incorporate it. Like, for example, if they're worried that everybody is just gonna write, for example, one prompt and then take the output as is and then just submit it, maybe instead of saying they don't allow AI, they can say, I allow AI, but I want you to submit your conversation history in addition to your final output. And so this way they can see the back and forth between the student and AI. And to me, I think that's where really the magic happens because AI is like it transforms so easily to your thought process that
Hmm.
I think you can see the level of the output or the quality of the output change significantly if you interact with it, if you give it more specified prompts, if you tell it exactly like how you're thinking, then it gets so much closer to your own thought process. So like this could be, for example, one example. If they are worried, let's say that the biggest um AI is like basically in every part of the classroom. I think in the short term, they could probably start increasing the in class examination, right? So
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
they know that they do not allow it. But for me, everything that's outside the classroom, they have to say that you can use AI and figure out ways of how to still grade students differently while assuming that they are using. I mean, I used to teach statistics, right? So in the exam, I mean, I usually would not allow scientific calculators, because scientific calculators can do most of the operations for you. I'll just allow a simple calculator
Yeah.
because I wanted them to like really think about the process themselves. But now, I mean, when they are at home, it would have been kind of weird for me to assume that they can only access a simple calculator and they don't have access to a scientific calculator, right? So
Hmm.
to me, I think it's kind of the same thought process. So you have to make sure that you are not um, basically creating like a disservice for these students, and you're helping them incorporate AI in their process as soon as possible. Because I think the important thing
Yeah.
there is that if students are allowed to work with AI and they don't have to hide it, I think professors can learn too, right? Because that way, they'll get the feedback and they're going to understand better what AI can and cannot do.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I think, getting that feedback without student feedback is going to be much harder for the professor because they'll have to do all the playing and all the experimentation themselves. So I think this helps professors too. And it also helps students figure out what kind of skills are going to be more important for them long term.
Yep.
Like if I see now that, let's say, the calculator can do the math for me, then maybe I shouldn't waste my time, learning all that. Maybe I should, spend more time on trying to learn how to think strategically, how to think critically. So I think that's basically also an important aspect, that as we know more about what AI can do, we also learn more about what it cannot do. And I think that's where our advantage as humans is going to be, like
Hmm.
the basically bridging the gap, right? And those are the skills that we need to start spending more time on and building for future generations. Because whatever AI can do, AI will be doing in the future, and that's that. Like
Definitely. Yeah, no, definitely. And it's also important not to, of course, as you were saying, right, create difficulties for students, but exacerbate current inequalities and, barriers to access to these tools. Because obviously, if you have, 50 students with calculators and 50 without, the performance on the test will probably not be the same. It's like a math test. Same thing goes for AI and the access to these tools. So,
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's a discussion above the professors, basically, at
yeah,
really the leadership of every university and every college. I think they have to be very open-minded and make sure that they are providing access to their students to as many AI tools as possible so that they can become equipped, right, with the knowledge that they need to be successful in the job market. For
yeah.
sure, I think it's a great point.
But as you were mentioning, I think it's a fascinating opportunity. The concept of Bloom's two sigma problem, uh, like proposed, I think around 50 years ago or something. Just the fact that you can get essentially through personalized tutoring, personalized lessons, which you can kind of get through AI, of course. You can get a huge improvement in performance in understanding, in educational and academic performance in general. And so I think there's massive potential. It's just trying to see a way where you can integrate it into the system while not creating these massive inequalities, causing obviously issues of plagiarism. And so it's not an easy task for sure, but I think having that open mindset of, of course, accepting it, knowing that it is here, it is not coming in the future, as you were saying. That's a very important point that we all have to keep in mind.
Yeah, and I think universities can really help us in terms of responsible AI because, if they start teaching these courses, I mean, once they start embracing AI, and then I think the major issue, as you said, is like using it in an unethical way, right? And they can teach courses in ethics so that these future generations,
Hmm.
they are equipped with that knowledge about what's right and what's wrong when you're using AI. And that's so much better than just saying you cannot use it, right? Because you are giving them the tool, but you're also teaching them how to use it. And I think this is something that universities can play a much better role than any government because that's where all the bright minds go. I mean, they go through
Hmm.
education, right? So if we have these courses where we teach them how to use the tool appropriately, how to use AI appropriately, then we have helped ourselves because now we are raising generations that are thinking ethically from the get-go, and we
Yep.
don't have to worry about them doing unethical things. So I think this is a very, very important movement that needs to happen for whichever universities basically are not even thinking about it.
Definitely, and especially as obviously new tools are coming out, new capabilities of certain models, the use cases themselves are always going to change and are going to evolve every day, and you can't keep up with that and obviously create new regulations. You have to install that, as you were saying, that critical thinking mindset, the ethical approach, and wondering really, is this a good use of this technology if I were to do my entire essay directly through ChatGPT? It depends, right? Probably not, because then you don't learn any of the skills that it would have otherwise taught you to have done it yourself. So it's cool to see somebody that has gone through the academic route and is now working in technology, and getting your perspective on that as well. I'm sure that if you were a pro, like doing your PhD now, you would have been doing or integrating AI
Oh,
into
it
your
would have been
courses.
so much easier for sure, especially I'd say the writing part.
Yeah,
And I mean, it's easier for professors too, to be honest, because I remember reading a lot of papers with so many like grammar mistakes, and I
yeah.
think it's a more enjoyable process. Like having AI do a lot of that, like lifting is a much more enjoyable process for everyone involved. So instead of like focusing on the quality of the writing, like word by word, we can focus more on the quality of the content, right? Like what kind of ideas is the student driving through, and what kind of innovation are they presenting? Um, I, I mean, I think that's pretty powerful, because then you don't have to spend time marking in red like everything that's wrong from the grammar perspective, but that doesn't have any weight at the grand scheme of things.
Hmm. There was an interesting paper, I believe, which showed that students who had English as a second language, so ESL students, tended to be more often flagged by these GPT checkers in a way, or what do they call them? Recognizers, rather than just English as a first language students. And so that could also be an issue. But I wanted to bring that up because um, obviously you coming from a different country as English as a second language, you mentioned this concept of being different isn't
For
deficient. Could you elaborate a
sure.
little bit more about that philosophy and what you mean by that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that everyone is strongest when they bring their authentic self, to school, to work, and when they bring their unique perspective. I believe. I mean, when I was younger, I'll accept, like I usually would always get intimidated, speaking English, because people could make fun of my accent or they wouldn't like it. But then, I had a mindset shift where I was like, well, this is my second language, like, well,
Hmm.
let me hear them speak in a second language. So I think it's just important to remember where we are coming from and everything that we persevered through in order to be where we are. And I think when you look at that journey, you see that you being different actually has added so much more to your, to who you are, and made you a much more marketable person in the industry, because you have so much more strength, so much more resilience. You don't take anything for granted. You know that you have to work really hard in order to get where you are. So I think all of these values are pretty important, and definitely, being different doesn't mean that we are deficient, even if the way how we write or the way how we speak is not like perfect. As long
Hmm.
as the way how we think is close to perfect.
For sure, I think we all bring unique values, and it's important to harness those. Do you have any advice for people trying to determine, what is my key quality that I can bring forward, especially when it comes to, seeking a new opportunity, like you had perhaps done finishing up your PhD and wondering where you're going to go. That's also an interesting story that we could get into, how you got into technology in the first place.
Yeah. So for me, I think deep down I always knew I wanted to work in the industry. And when I was in my PhD, I mean, as I said, I was teaching and I really enjoyed that. I mean, the students, Trinity College was like an amazing liberal arts institution. It had like great students. I really, really enjoyed like teaching them. But during that period, I also went through the process of publishing my job market paper. And I
Hmm.
just saw how much bureaucracy there was in like publication. And to some extent, there's a lot of like unfairness as well, because, you have these big names that co-author with each other. And, they basically increase the probability of their papers being published. And for me, I was publishing it just by myself. And, I wasn't co-authoring, it was my own job market paper. And I kind of tried to see me being in that future, and I just couldn't see myself in it. I was like, this is too much work for such little satisfaction, basically.
Hmm.
Because, I mean, you go through so much work to get your paper published. And at the end of the day, maybe like 10 people are going to read it, So the impact is really low compared to the effort that you put into it. I mean, unless you're doing something that really makes like a huge difference, which I'm sure there's a lot of scholars, but I mean, as you said, everybody has to look at their own journey and see
Yeah.
where they fit. So for
Hmm.
me, I knew that I wasn't like this kind of trailblazer when it comes to research, coming up with these extraordinary ideas where my contributions would be valuable like globally. So that's, I think, another reason why I decided to no longer pursue academia. But I mean, also when I was on the job market, it was in the middle of the pandemic, and at the time, most academic positions were frozen because
Hmm.
universities, they were trying to just adjust to the new normal. And I think it was chaos everywhere. So at the time, I remember I applied to a lot of like government jobs, consultancy jobs, and Amazon was the only tech job that I applied to, thanks to persuasion from a friend of mine who was working at Etsy. He's like, you
Hmm.
should do it. They're hiring a lot of economists. To be honest, I never thought I stood a chance because I always had this idea that like big tech hires from prestigious universities. And I was not coming from like a top 20 or top 50 university. And so I was like, they're not even going to look at my resume. But just because he insisted so much, I was like, okay, I mean, the incremental cost of applying to Amazon for me was close to zero. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna honor, his request. And so I went ahead and I applied, and I basically got through the first interview and then the loop. And actually, Amazon ended up being the only offer that I got that year.
That's
I went
incredible.
the last stage with another like consultancy firm and with a government job, but they basically in the last stage they did not pick me, so they didn't
Hmm.
give me an offer. They went with the other candidate, but Amazon was able, to see value in me,
Hmm.
and I'm internally grateful for that. And I think now that I'm on the other side where I interview people, I think one of the strongest or best things about Amazon is that we, I mean, basically your pedigree has zero importance. So we always look at the skill set. So as long as you have the right skill set, you're always going to be in demand at Amazon, and I'm sure at other tech companies as well. So I think this is probably a myth that I had at the time that I'm sure probably others have as well, but they shouldn't hold to it because I don't think there's a lot of truth to it. So if you have the
Hmm.
skill set, if you know that you can do the job, I mean, you should definitely apply to a position and you should not self reject. Like I almost did. And then probably I'll be unemployed now. Who knows?
We probably wouldn't be having this conversation.
Exactly.
But that's wonderful. And on the concept of those skills, given that obviously everything's moving so fast, what's perhaps some of the key skills in general, not just in technology, perhaps, or just for Amazon, that are going to be important, that's not going to change in the next like 5, 10 years? Things that are important today, but that will remain important in the future, no matter really what happens.
Yeah, I think for me, people skills are going to be super important. We are always going to need people, no matter the company. I think the way how I see it, usually the bigger the company, I think the more people you are going to need and the harder it is going to be to basically change to AI.
Hmm.
Because you probably saw the news about like Shopify and
Yeah.
Spotify and a lot of these like smaller companies, they are already changing to this AI first mindset. And
Hmm.
I'm sure that every company is going to kind of like follow through. But I think for big companies, it's so much harder. And the biggest issue for me is like the data, right? Like the way how data is collected. I mean,
Hmm.
in many times it's in silo. And so you need people to make sense of that data.
Hmm.
I think from a people perspective, like from soft skills perspective, for me, I believe, the most important ones are going to be being able to work like cross functionally, being able to like cross collaborate. I think everyone should be able to prototype. So I think
Hmm.
the lanes between the different roles are going to be much more blurry than now. Like, we would expect, for example, someone who is an economist who right now, let's say, doesn't write a lot of productionized code to maybe use Cursor or use like some of these tools that help to maybe try and productionize something end to end themselves, right?
As you did
Or,
with your demo.
yes, as I did with my demo. I mean, that was like very minor compared to what can be built. But yeah,
That
that's the
is, yeah.
idea that like we have to extend. I feel like every role will have to extend themselves through AI
Hmm.
so that they become more valuable and so that they can connect better with other functions. Same thing is true for product, for example. I think in the future we should expect product managers to be able to do the prototypes themselves before they even engage the engineering team.
Hmm.
Because right now, there's just so many tools that, they have access to where they can try to come up with an MVP. So I think these are, I mean, definitely keeping an open mind. And I think before the company can become AI first, everybody in the company has to change their mindset to AI first.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of what will be happening in the next few years is like putting a lot of emphasis on training and upskilling people so that they can start seeing the value of AI. I think critical thinking, strategic thinking, and being empathetic are some things that AI cannot do. So for some things, I think we always are going to need people to be in the loop. So we'll need humans in the loop to make sure that the quality of what we are producing is basically good enough, is empathetic, is diverse. I think that kind of judgment I wouldn't rely on AI to do anytime soon.
Of course.
So I still see those as being like our advantages as humans.
That's a great point. I hadn't actually heard that prototype first kind of approach. I guess it does make sense, and it kind of goes to the vision of everybody building first and having a lot of builders being employed, and not just employees, so people that can actually create things and not execute tasks as perhaps an agent would. And so yeah, that's something that might need as well upscaling in general for a lot of the non-technical roles. But given all the tools that are currently existing, I mean, you yourself were able to deploy, admittedly on a smaller scale, but I mean, in and of itself is already pretty impressive to have done that. A quick demo on AI, having to learn obviously the basics of AI, and then also create a product to demo it. So that's impressive.
Well, it helped that I watched the demo first from them, so I think I had a
Yeah.
kind of some rough idea of what I needed to do. Um, but I mean, what you said is definitely right. I think everyone should think about how do they upskill themselves within their field or within their task. And what I've seen so far is that AI can already do a lot of tasks pretty well.
Hmm.
So I think AI is gonna definitely replace tasks, not necessarily roles. I think we're still gonna need roles, but roles are gonna have to adapt. So
Hmm.
that, if you're not doing that test manually anymore, then what are you going to do for the rest of your time, right?
Yeah.
Maybe build more prototypes, right? Experiment, explore. We will go through a transformation, I would say, in the next 5 years.
Wonderful. Wonderful. And so where do you see yourself placing your skills, your talent, your vision in this transformation in the next couple of years? Do you have any particular goals you have in mind? within Amazon or apart from that as well?
I mean, I want to learn as much as I can. So right now, I feel like this field is moving so fast, and I'm just trying to stay on top of it. Um, I mean, obviously, I think the goal is to build solutions that make an impact.
Hmm.
Any product that you build is as good as the number of people that use it, right? So for me, it's very important to think AI first, but also think backwards from the customers and from the users. And
Yeah.
so for me, I think that's key. So I'm always trying to connect dots. That's what I try to do every day in my life. Is there things that I can connect that nobody else is seeing that could facilitate how we do what we do? And I don't mean that only within Amazon, but also at home. I mean, also like in my engagement with LinkedIn, I have kind of automated almost everything that I do so that it's easier on me. So I think there's just so many ways how AI can help. Is it like reminding you about like your kids' appointments or scheduling appointments for you, or, giving you reminders when, let's say you have something that you want to return and the window is closing.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of things that we can have AI help us even at an individual level, especially for someone, let's say for me, I'm very forgetful. So I always try to use AI when it comes to timelines. But I'm sure others, might have other things that they don't enjoy doing. And I think AI can definitely help. So I'm always looking for those connections that maybe are not very easy to see, and, try to connect those dots.
That's great. That's great. So I don't want to go over time. I know we're nearing the end, but I do want to leave you the floor if you have anything you want to say to the audience, any piece of advice you want to say, any projects you have coming up that you want to share. Completely open floor for anything you want.
I mean, first, I want to thank you again for having me here. I think this has been awesome. The only advice that I would give is that I know, right now we are going through transformation in every direction. And I know that people who are looking for jobs are probably feeling very demotivated and they feel like they're not worth it because they're not getting any callbacks. So I just want to, you know, tell them that I empathize. I know this is a very difficult situation, but, I don't want them to take this personally as if, they are not worth it. I think this is just the situation right now. And I know this doesn't help much, but I mean, I truly feel so bad for everyone that I know is like looking for jobs and has been looking for jobs for a long period of time and feels more threatened by AI with each passing day. Uh, so I think that's my biggest advice is to upskill yourself as much as you can, because that can never go wrong. Like learning more is always going to be worthwhile.
Never stop learning. That's wonderful.
Yes, never stop learning.
Well, on that note, thank you so much for the time. There's so many different pieces of advice and great stories from our conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your
Thank you.
journey and so much to learn from.
Thank you so much. I really, really enjoyed this. Thank
My
you.
my pleasure. Bye.